So I'm going to cook my version of the nation's favourite dish, which is the chicken tikka masala. It's a lovely dish. It's really rich. It's got lots of flavour in there. And it's a two-stage process. So the initial stage is a marination of the chicken. Sometimes I put a bit of pepper in there and some onions in there, but today I'm just going to keep it really simple and just use the chicken. The marinade is a yoghurt-based marinade. So I tend to use thick Greek yogurt, and I'll probably use about 3 tablespoons. There's enough chicken there to probably feed at least 4 people, so 3 tablespoons of yogurt is plenty. Into that I'm going to start to add some flavours, and the initial one that I'm going to use is coriander. So coriander seeds basically give a real sort of lemony, tangy freshness. So I'm going to use a teaspoon of those, and I'm going to give them a bit of a bash in my pestle and mortar. Ideally, go for seeds and crush them yourself because you get much more fragrance, much more of an aromatic from the spice rather than using a powder. So you just need to grind them up until they're broken down and they're a lovely papery, wafery thin, and you start to get the aromatics coming through. So I'm just going to pop that in. And into that then I'm going to add some ginger and garlic. And the ginger and garlic, I'm just again going to use my pestle and mortar, and I'm going to give them a bash. With the ginger, just chop it up. Some people take a long time skinning it and washing and what have you. So what I tend to do is just give it a rinse, use the skin, pop it into my pestle and mortar and just give it all a bash together. It smells amazing, and that's that lovely flavour that you're trying to infuse. There we go. We just want to break up the surface area and just get lots of flavour into there. So pop that in. There we go. And then into that I'm going to add my chilli powder for a little bit of heat. I tend to use Kashmiri chilli powder just because I like it. It gives a real smokiness. I'm going to put some salt for seasoning, probably about a teaspoon. And then the other thing I'm going to add is fenugreek. So this is fenugreek. I'm going to try and show you a little bit more. So this is fenugreek. To me, it's the iconic curry aromatic. It's got that real sort of earthy flavour. It's lovely. And I tend to use this with lentils, meat dishes, that kind of thing. So I'm going to just give that a sprinkle. It's very different from the fenugreek powder because this is much more gentle. So I'm going to put, I'll be a little bit more generous, put a little bit more in. Okay, so that's what you need in terms of your spices. The other thing I'm going to add is a little bit of lime juice. Oh, give that a good squeeze. And what this is going to do is it's going to almost start the cooking process with the chicken. It's going to start tenderising it. It's going to infuse lots of lovely, lovely flavours into the meat. In terms of the meat, I'm using thigh meat. The reason that I use thigh meat, particularly with Indian food, is because it's much more, it's got slightly more fat running through it. It's brown meat, so it just holds the flavour better. And I just think it makes for a really nice cut of meat as compared to breast. But if you don't like thigh meat, then by all means use breast meat. What I will say is that if you do use thigh meat, just make sure that you take all the fat off and just remove the skin and that kind of thing. So once it's in there, you really want to mix that all up so that you get all the lovely flavours penetrating into it. And you'll end up with this lovely orangey colour that you know chicken tikka masala is known for. I always use my hands because I like to feel the food and I like to know that it's all mixed in properly, but by all means use a spoon if you're not comfortable doing that. Right, so that's what we're looking for. It all comes together, and I'm going to let that sit and marinate for probably about an hour. The longer you leave it, the better, but by all means, if you don't have that much time, then leave it for a shorter period, but the longer the better with any marinade, really. So I'm just going to pop that to one side. I'm going to go and wash my hands, and then we'll get going with the sauce. So the chicken has been marinating, and now it's time to start on the sauce. What's really important about this sauce is that it's a really decadent sauce. It's really rich and it's full of flavour. So I'm going to be using lots of whole spices. When you're using whole spices, it's really important to temper them in oil. In other words, heat up your oil and add them to the oil first. And what that does is it just gets those spices to release their natural aromatics and their natural oils. So I've put in probably about a tablespoon of oil. I'm going to pop in some bay leaves, 2 bay leaves, and then I'm going to add in my other spices. What I've got here is cassia bark. This is also known as true cinnamon, and it's got a really wonderful, almost sweet flavour. It's one of those spices that you would use for other dishes, things like the pasanders and the kormas, the light fragrance dishes. So I'm going to put some of that in. It smells a little bit like cinnamon, but it's much more gentle compared to cinnamon. So I'm going to put in probably about 5 centimetres of that in. Pop that in. The oil's going to start to sizzle, and then we're going to add in. So the other spice I'm going to add in here, I'm going to put in 3 cloves. Oh, there we go. So 3 cloves and 3 cardamom as well. Now, whenever you use cardamom, I know some of you will love them, some of you will hate them. They give a really lovely bittersweet flavour. So all I do is just crack them open. So if you're the sort of person that doesn't like cardamom and doesn't like the flavour or the full flavour that it gives you when you bite down on it, you can either break them open, take the seeds out and bash them in a pestle and mortar and just use those, and that gives you the flavour, or you can blitz the whole of the pod in a coffee or a spice grinder, and again you'll get the flavour, but you won't get that overpowering sensation when you bite down on them. So once your spices are in, as soon as you can smell them, and I can smell them now, they're getting really aromatic, I'm going to pop in my cumin seeds. So a teaspoon of cumin seeds. I'm going to put a little bit more in, and I can really start to smell that now. And as soon as you can get that aromatic, you need to pop in your onions. So I've chopped up some onions really finely, and for any dish like this where you're looking for a lovely smooth sauce, always make sure your onions are really finely chopped. You don't want great big chunky pieces of onion in your sauce. So sometimes I will go to the lengths of either blitzing them down in a blender as well. Depends how I'm feeling on the day, really. So I'm just going to cook this down until you get a lovely golden brown colour. You make sure that your temperature is on a fairly medium heat so that you don't burn those onions. Once they start to brown, then we're going to come back and we're going to add some other spices and bits and pieces to them. So I'm just going to leave these to do their job, if you like. And whilst that's sizzling away, I'm going to go over and get my marinated chicken and my tray, and I'm going to start to cook the chicken in the oven. So the marinated chicken is looking lovely. It's beautiful in colour. It's that lovely orange colour. And all we want to do now is just pop this onto a baking tray, and then I'm going to cook that in the oven until it's nice and charred almost. So I'm just going to pop that in. I'm going to get as much of the marinade as I can, scoop that in, and I'm just going to spread that out a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to give this a slightly smoky flavour, and the way that I'm going to do that is by using mustard oil. Mustard oil has a real sort of smokiness to it, and all I'm going to do is just drizzle that on top of the chicken. So normally what they would use for this dish are the leftovers from your tandoori chicken. That's why you're looking for that smoky flavour. So the leftover pieces would be shredded and put into a really thick creamy sauce, and that's where this sort of dish comes from. So once you've got everything in a tray, I'm just going to pop that straight into the oven at about 180 degrees. And what you want to do is you want to leave it so that it does start to get a little bit charred around the edges, because again, it's all about that lovely smoky flavour. So the onions are looking really lovely, looking nice and golden brown. Into that, I'm going to start to add some other spices. And the first thing I'm going to do is put in some ginger and garlic. All I've done to this is I've just bashed it in a pestle and mortar. Just pop that in. That's probably about 4 cloves of garlic and a 3 centimetre piece of ginger. So I'm going to give that a stir through. It's really important that you do cook this off, because you've got lots of raw flavours in there. Into this, I'm going to add some more spices. I mentioned before that it's a really decadent dish, and what I'm going to do is add some coriander seeds and some cumin seeds, but I'm going to give them a bit of a bash so that they go through the sauce. just a teaspoon of coriander and a teaspoon of cumin. And then I'm just going to grind those up. You don't need to get them to a fine powder or anything like that. It's just going to add a little bit of texture to your sauce. But the flavour when you use fresh whole spices and grind them yourself compared to what you would do if you used powdered spices is so much better. Okay, so once those are in there, I'm going to pop those in, and then I'm going to put some chilli powder in as well. So I'm going to add a hot chilli powder this time. And whenever you're adding any powders to a dry masala base like this, you need to be a little bit careful because they can burn. If you're worried that they might burn, just add a little splash of water. So I've got a little glass of water here. They look fine at the moment. I'm just going to pop a little bit in, and that's going to help all of that come together. So whilst those are just cooking off a little bit, I'm going to whiz up some tomatoes, and I'm going to pop those into the sauce as well. I'm using fresh tomatoes for this dish because, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about the decadence of this dish. So you want to use your best ingredients. You could use tin tomatoes if you don't have fresh tomatoes, but I prefer to go with fresh for this one. So I'm going to use 3 and see how it looks. I'm going to roughly chop them and just pop them in to my blender. And that lovely orangey colour that a chicken tikka masala is known for, the colour really comes from the tomatoes. There we go, it's looking good. Now, for me, a chicken tikka masala, what is a chicken tikka masala? For me, it's all about the cashew nuts. My chicken tikka masala, I tend to use just dried cashew nuts that I blitz up and make into a puree, and that's what I'm going to use, one, to flavour the dish, but also it helps to thicken the sauce and it gives it that really creamy, smooth flavour. I'm just going to pop those in. Actually, that might be a little bit too much. Pop those in, and I'm just going to blitz those up to a really fine powder. There we go. And that's what you're looking for. Lovely sort of dry powder. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix that up with the tomatoes and give that a mix through to make almost like a cashew tomato paste. So once you've got that lovely paste, I'm going to pop that into the dish as well. So I'm just pouring the tomato and cashew nut paste into the sauce, and we're going to give that a stir, and we're going to create that lovely thick sauce that we're looking for. So once your tomato and cashew nut paste is in there, you just need to cook that off. With tomatoes, they have almost like an intrinsic acidity to them, so you need to make sure that you cook those down. I'm going to turn my heat up just a little bit to help that, to help those tomatoes cook through. Sometimes you'll find that you get a really thick sauce like this immediately, and if that's the case, you can just add a little bit of water to loosen it up. Other times, when the tomatoes are much more ripe, you'll get a much more liquidy sauce. So just play it by ear. If it needs cooking down a bit just to thicken up, then do that. If you need to add a little bit of liquid, then you can do that too. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water. There we go. And as this cooks through, you'll start to get that beautiful orangey colour that the chicken tikka masala is known for. I'm going to pop in a little bit of turmeric as well and stir that through. So as that heats up, as you start to heat that all the way through, I'm just going to turn the heat down a little bit. I'm just going to leave this for a good 3 or 4 minutes just to cook it through. so that all the flavours combine and they all come together and you're left with a really thick, luscious sauce. So we'll come back to this in a few minutes. So the sauce is pretty much there. It's really thick. It looks lovely. I'm going to add just a touch of water because I want to loosen it up a little bit. And then I'm going to go and get the chicken out the oven. And now's when I start to get really excited. There we go. So that's looking lovely. I'm going to add a touch more. I'm going to just turn that heat up just a little bit. So that's what you want, a really thick, luscious sauce. And we've added no butter, no cream, nothing to that. And it's all from the fresh, beautiful ingredients that we've added in there. We are going to make it a little bit more decadent by putting a splash of cream in at the end. But whilst that's all coming together and heating through, I'm just going to go and get the chicken out the oven. So that's what we're looking for. Beautiful, crispy, marinated chicken that's all cooked through. And you've got this lovely, almost barbecued crust on it. So once that's all cooked through like it has done, I'm going to just pop that straight into the sauce. Sometimes I'll use this and I'll put it in a little wrap for my lunch for the next day, so I keep a little bit spare. But I'm just going to pop all of that into that lovely sauce. There we go, that's going in there, look at that. Just going to stir that all the way through. Now that is looking pretty special. I'm happy with that. So just to finish this dish off, I'm going to add the all-important touch of fenugreek again. So I'm just going to pop that in, just a teaspoon. And if you want to, you can put in that cream, just a little touch of cream. But if you don't, just leave it out because this sauce is already thick and creamy and luscious, and that's come from the cashew nuts. But if you want to, a little touch of decadence, you can pop a little bit of cream in and just turn that off so you're not heating it through, and just stir that in. Now I'm in my happy place. This dish is done. It's looking and smelling amazing. So what I've got is some rice on the go, and if you've enjoyed this recipe and you want to find a little bit more inspiration, then please come and have a look at all my other recipes on harrygotra.co.uk.